reception at the end, please do take a look at our Perspective series of books. It's a set of 4 books that are written for singers. They are collections of essays on various subjects. And one of them that may be of particular interest to you today is called Building and Managing Your Network. And Ms. Laura Brooks-Rice behind me has written one of the articles in that book. So a little bit about what's going on tonight. And with that, I will turn it over to my panel. Thank you all for being here.
Hi, I'm Charles, and I'm going to moderate tonight. And everybody has the bios, right? I there's no need to introduce my illustrious panel, but I just want to start by saying it's great to be here in Opera America building, because that's the best place to network. No question about it. You're doing the right thing if you're here, and they've put a great panel together of nice balance for the industry of a director and a singer / teacher, educator, writer, and stage director. And I guess I'll just start with my particular niche in this business as a producer, which is, I guess, I'm going to start by what I asked my panelists, is an anecdote that kind of tells, what you did to make it possible to get where you are, and why did that happen. I think with producing, the interesting thing is really keeping an amazing, when I look back, an amazing network going all the time of singers, directors, artists, managers, PR people, and the best advice I can give you is make a good impression right from the start. And I think the sample that I'm going to use as what came back for me is a assistant directorship I did in 1989 in England, which now I am using those contacts that I made in 1989 as a lowly assistant director to open an opera that we developed at the Royal Opera House in the UK. And it's a direct relationship. The seeds that were planted there, that in 1989, that I was able to cultivate and keep track of, and let them know what I was doing and be interested in what they were doing all along the way, have given me the groundwork to start building this production, which is going to happen in November 2011 of a new opera. And so I guess, again, my little advice, and I'm going to then stop is make a good impression in the beginning, keep track of your contacts, and here's the new information, is don't just focus on your own little individual career. Make sure you're looking at a big picture. It's you fit into a big picture, and you need to look at everyone else that does the other jobs alongside of you and make sure that they know who you are, and if you can offer help to them, if you can offer kind words to them, if you can offer connections to them, that is going to help you along the way. So it's maybe hard to get out of this rut of like just me, I have to focus on me. My advice is step back and say, this is the opera business. This involves a whole bunch of people, and I'm going to embrace all of it. And let's start. Just go right down the line.
Chuck Hudson, stage director. I'm Chuck Hudson. I'm a stage director. I'm also an acting instructor and a movement instructor for both actors and singers. I came to opera late, I guess. I came from the theater world. I was an actor and a director. And I was working in Seattle as a teacher of actors, both movement and acting classes, and directing. And I wanted to learn more about large theater companies, and I had never really been involved with opera before in the past. So I decided to go and get a part-time job at Seattle Opera in their development department to learn about how a large company runs. And I said to myself, well, they're not going to think about me as a director anyway because I don't do opera. Well, lo and behold, that's where my opera career started. They were just beginning their Young Artist program. They were looking for someone to help write a curriculum, to teach acting, to teach movement, because those are the things that seem to be missing in the training, and those are the things that most people want opera singers to start embracing now. And it's that strange thing of being in the right place at the right time, that taking advantage of lucky situations and not just acting on them, but following through with them, being able to, as Charles just said, present yourself and make a good first impression, to know what it is that you're talking about and what you have to offer, so that when somebody out there is ready for you to bring it to them, they will. Since that time, I've been doing less and less theater and more opera, oddly enough, and my career would not have taken that direction had I not knocked on that door and said, please give me a job.
I have a question. How many of you all are still in school? Any of you singers? So you're all post-conservatory. Excellent. The reason I asked that is that one of the I think most important things I did as a graduate student at Indiana University was to work stage crew. You know, yes, I wanted to be the diva on the stage, and I wanted the lead roles as a mezzo-soprano. That was not going to happen. But I learned everything I could about the stage. I built the props. I swept the stage. I pushed the scenery on. I pulled the curtain. I did all of those things. And when I moved out of conservatory and was a Met National finalist, I felt very comfortable on that stage because I understood all the things around me. And as I progressed to be a professional singer, not just because I did those things, but I had an appreciation for the whole art form and the process of making opera. And that, I think, makes you a good colleague. And it does make a good impression on a company, and it makes a good impression on those people who are doing what you might think are the extra stuff. You know, they're very important to you. They're going to be very important to you being rehired in a company. So if you haven't done something like that, I encourage you to do it. It's interesting to, when I look back on what I started out to do as a singer out of school and where I am now, you know, I wouldn't have predicted what I'm doing now. I've been a college professor for 25 years, and I now run a young artist training program in the summer. And I can go back now 30 years to people I sang with, or who directed me, or was a props person, who might have moved up in their company, and I can call on them for advice. I can ask them to hear singers, and it's only because we made a connection at some point, and we're prepared and we're good colleagues. And I didn't know I was networking for what I'm doing now when I was a singer. I didn't know that I could draw on those connections. But I think it's what you said. It's very important that you show up and do everything that you have control over, that you're prepared. You're prepared with your role. You're prepared to be a collaborative artist with a director and with a conductor. And there's lots of things in the Opera America publications that talk about what that means to be prepared, which I encourage you to look at. And just do those things that you do have control over, and do it, and do it, and do it every single time. And eventually it gets recognized.
Hi, I'm Alex Fletcher. I'm an artist manager. And I guess my anecdote goes back a lot to what Charles and Laura said specifically about working your connections when you're at a company and you're not really sure where you're going to go. Unfortunately, I can't go back to 1989 like Charles, but I can go back a few years to when I was a PR intern at Washington National Opera. And I went to college in Virginia at a small liberal arts school. I didn't really know a ton about opera. Like Chuck, I came to opera kind of late in my education. And I landed an internship at Washington Opera because my voice teacher knew the PR director, and they went to church together, and of course I grabbed it because it was great. And you know, I just started talking to people at the company, working connections at the company, you know, networking with people, asking if I could go sit down and talk with them about what their job was. To use a specific example, at Washington, around the time that I did my internship, Scott Guzlick, who's the artistic administrator there under Christina Scheppelmann, had just taken that job, and he was also in a learning curve trying to figure out, you know, okay, I'm into a new part of this company, you know, what am I doing? And he let me come in and sit with him and talk to him and talk about the different ways that you could be involved at an opera company. And I just kept in touch with him, you know, and every time that I took a little step in my journey in getting into the opera business, I let him know what was going on. And now that I'm an artist manager, I really benefit from that relationship because I can tell my clients, don't worry about Washington. I have a good connection there. I'm known there, and that makes a big difference. So for me, just keeping that relationship intact and respecting the fact that he was willing to let me come in and talk to him, really makes a difference now a few years later when I'm trying to manage clients and market them to companies like Washington.
I was just reminded, someone was telling me about a graduation commencement speaker who gave rather a negative speech recently. A friend of mine was hearing about, it's going to be hard for you, and there's so many of you out there now, and times are tough, and the competition is cutthroat. And did that ever cross any of you guys' minds? Was that ever an obstacle for you, that you knew that it was tough out there and there was competition?
It's hard everywhere. I mean, it's like you never say that to an accountant. It's hard. There's a lot of you out there. I mean, you have to decide something that was in the advertising for this is that to be successful as an artist, and that's really important. Is that if you want to make a career out of this is your job. This is a thought process you need to have over a certain amount of time. It's not just something that you're doing for fun and that the competition is going to stop you from doing it. My nephew plays the piano beautifully. He does not want to make a career out of playing the piano, so he's not going to do the things that somebody who wants to make a career at it would do. And those that do want to make a career at it, I think, will not be halted by the difficulties and the adversities that are going to present themselves.
And that's what we're going to talk about, is exactly, we're going to try to compile that list.
It's important that you know who you are as an artist, and that network of people that you have around you are people that you can trust to be honest with you. That, I guess that's why I didn't ever think about it as being too difficult, in that I had people that I trusted who said, yes, you're doing the right thing, and this is the direction that you should go. And I would listen to them and follow their advice. When you get to a certain point in your singing career, then you have to, just like in any business, you have to take stock of where you are and where you're going, and you might end up going in a lateral direction. But and all along the way, you take stock of your talent and your product and what you have to offer, and have those people around you that will be honest with you and that you trust.
It's very interesting in my profession. Watching new works grow is the same thing, because we bring composers and brevists into a forum and say, create, and we're going to have an audience, give feedback to you. And some people can't take feedback at all. The only people they'll say, that really liked it, and I'm sticking by that, is my mom. And believe me, I've heard that phrase. But it's true what Laura says also. Having a sort of a bigger picture of where you sit, but also having a few very trusted individuals. That has to be a little balanced, not just your mom and your...
Oh, no, definitely not your mom. In my case, definitely. She would always say, they're going to pay you for that?
But having that trusted group of professionals, would you say?
Yes.
Who can tell you.
And that really know, somebody who really knows you and really knows your voice.
As an artist manager, do you find that you do a lot of counseling in this direction?
Absolutely, yeah. I think that for any artist that I represent and any artist that I'm looking to represent, I want to know who's on their team. I want to know what the structure is, because when I'm representing an artist, I'm not just speaking with the artist. Of course I want to know what the artist wants, but I also am speaking with the voice teacher. I'm also speaking with their coaches. If they have a PR person, I'm speaking with that person, and all of that is cultivated to create the ultimate package. So as an artist manager, the strength and quality of that group of people is extremely important to me and extremely valuable to me, because we all know how fickle a business this is, and getting back to your point about how difficult a business this is for singers, one way that you can really build your stock and that you can build your security is by having a high quality group of individuals to fall back on, and for your management team to also interact with.
Chuck, for you, when you're looking, which I'm sure you are all the time, how to populate operas you direct or the projects you're taking on, what, do you consult with all of the artist managers, producers, singing teachers?
Yes.
Is your network all of them?
It's a referral business that we are in, and a lot of times people will contact me because my name is on a singer's resume, and they'll say, what was it like to work with this person? If I am looking at a singer's resume and I see people who I have worked with who are in my field of trusted professionals who I go to for my own work even, I will more likely call them than anybody else because I agree with the direction that they would want to take things.
Right. Yeah. And it's not bad, I don't think, if you call for a reference on a singer and the response is, yeah, very good singer, and boy, can she move props well, you know, right? I mean, having a well-rounded persona that you project is not bad.
And work ethic, something we were just discussing, work ethic is one of the most important things, and that's something, especially when I'm working at young artist programs, that it's the last thing that people think about, is that your talent gets you hired, your work ethic gets you hired back.
Yeah.
And there are lots of resumes that you look at where you see people working one time at lots of great houses, and when you do the follow-up on that, you realize that they don't have a work ethic, or they're not a good colleague, or they're not collaborative, and those are the things that will suddenly get you weeded out of the herd.
And that's a very big flag for artist management as well, because, you know, obviously we want artists who are well-liked and who will be re-invited and who will build in some of that, you know, work in the future for themselves. And so that's a big red flag for me looking at someone's resume if they've consistently worked at a company once, and it's been several years and they've never come back.
Is that sometimes a factor? I get this question a lot, actually. It's like, Charles, what, you know, I sang the lead role there last time, now they're asking me back, you know, as featured roles, and should I take it? I'm covering, and it's a case-by-case thing, I guess, but again, I'm more of the old school is, you know, work begets work. Your calendar's free. Take the work. Build those relationships any place you can. And the best place to do it is in a functioning company.
But it depends too on what they're, you know, sometimes they'll cast you in a secondary role because they're listening for 3 seasons down the road. They're listening to see if, you know, if you're singing First Lady, that maybe you are a future Queen of the Night. You know, we don't know, so we can hear that. So sometimes, yes, I think work begets work. You take the job and you do your work for the very best, and who knows what's going to come of it.
How about you, Alex? Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
With singers, and who else do you represent?
I have one director and one conductor, and Chuck and I were actually talking beforehand about how representing conductors and representing directors is a little bit of a different game from representing singers, in part because there is not the audition opportunity. It doesn't go through those normal channels. And, you know, in fact, this workshop is great for someone like Chuck because, you know, that becomes even more important. The networking becomes such a big deal, especially for conductors and for directors. But certainly, you know, I've had artists who have worked at a sustainable level for a number of years, and they have 1 year where it's just off, and that happens, you know, where there's just 1 year where the stars don't align, and they get offered a secondary role at a pretty good regional company. I say take it, because, you know, I would rather have them making a good impression at one place in the season than nowhere, if that's how things have fallen.
And you never know what that opportunity is going to bring to you. And you know, I'm an independent contractor just like all of you guys are, and I've got to put myself out there just like any other artist does. And I have often accepted to do a show in a smaller venue, not a lot of money, that had a lot of artistic freedom to it, that allowed me to explore, and I continually work with those people. That the person that I met or the company that I went to at that time, for some odd reason, they're somebody that I go back to constantly.
I think it's important to realize, I sat on a panel like this several years ago with my former manager, who was with Colbert Artists. And she made the point of saying, you know, you've got a network for us. You know, you may have an end with this company that I don't, and I may need you to make an introduction for me. So you are networking for your team as well. And that's, instead of it's all about me.
Yeah.
You know, I've been there.
Yeah.
You know, you are networking, and I was like, oh, really? Okay. I mean, you would want me to introduce you to the general director of this company?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think I read an article once where Matthew Epstein said you have to be the CEO of your own company if you're a singer, and it's absolutely true. Anytime that I'm taking on an artist, we always talk right up front about where are the good connections. Who does that artist have a personal relationship with that can be explored, because it has to be a partnership from a manager-artist standpoint. If you're expecting your manager to come up with 12 months of work year-round, it's not happening. So it has to be a collaboration. And, I think that, I had a director tell me once, all I asked of my management was that they bring me one job a year. I got the other 5 jobs that year myself. If they bring me one job a year, I feel like that's paying for the commissions, because it's such an intense networking environment. And so I think you're absolutely right.
Well, the good news is it's easier to network than ever.
Oh, so much. And be careful how you network.
Yeah. I know there's a designer just wrote us saying, email is going to be the death of relationships. There's no relationships anymore. There's email. I can't agree with that. I can't agree with that. I think email has made my life huge.
I just friendly John Moriarty. How weird is that?
Yeah. I met just the other day. I met at a very casual function a singer, a artist manager, and one other person. All of them sent me just a little brief email that I got. Thank you. It was nice meeting you. And their contacts. So just push a button. All that context goes right into the database. Do you find that amazing?
It's the funny thing too, when we were talking about needing to be the CEO of your own company, is this is the tedious day-to-day work. It's not the fun. I'm not on stage. I'm not singing. It's not glorious. Nobody's applauding for me. But starting the relationship is one thing. Maintaining that relationship is the important thing, and that's where something like email comes in so easily. I work with designers almost exclusively on email now. I don't have to wait for a fax. I don't have to have a delivery. They'll email me a JPEG. I get to then note on it and send it back. We'll have one phone call. It's done. With singers or with actors, I send them before I'm doing the show. This is my concept. Do you have any questions? I'd like to learn more about you, to start that communication process. And when I'm in South Africa doing a show and you're in Australia doing a show, we can do it on our own time and still have that conversation.
Laura, do you recommend singers have websites, and what kind of websites?
Yeah, I do. But again, you want to be careful what you post. What your mother thinks might have been a really wonderful aria on your senior recital, I wouldn't necessarily put up on your website because it's there forever. You need to make sure that you're putting up anything that you would want to be up on the billboard on Times Square that you put out there.
Be very, very,
Very careful, very discreet.
Quality.
And it's got to be quality. It's very interesting. When a student, I've had several young students who are coming to Westminster and contacted me about wanting to study. I immediately Googled them and I looked them up on Facebook. And if there were some questionable pictures, I'm not going to teach them. Period. And that's happening more and more in the bigger picture.
Every university where I have directed in the past couple of years, all of the students that are there suddenly friend me on Facebook. And I'm like, great, yes, wonderful. And a few of them say, oh, don't judge me for the pictures that I have. And I'm like, well, don't have those pictures up. That's the first impression that you're going to make. And take them off. It's a public venue.
Yeah. I know Alex has a gorgeous website. You should all check it out. But you also have links to all of your individual singers' websites on your website.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that those kind of opportunities are invaluable. And especially that I can link things to YouTube and all sorts of stuff. Like Laura says, again, hopefully my artists aren't posting things that, shouldn't be up there representing them. But
or that their college friends aren't posting things that they did.
Right.
One of my former students sings all over the world, and then somebody was posting some things on Facebook, and she put a stop to it, a very friendly stop to it, but I don't want that out there.
Yeah.
Do you monitor that? How do you say, if I'm going to put your link there, I'm going to have some quality control over?
No, I don't. I mean, most of my artists are responsible enough that that's not an issue, so I haven't had to run into that. I mean, I have had clients, or I have clients who say, I don't use Facebook because, you know, I did a few professional jobs and it started to blend the two. And, you know, I just felt uncomfortable with people who I've met in a professional setting coming into my personal setting. And they said, as a result, I have to say 6 or 7 times a day, I'm not on Facebook. What was that piece of information that everyone knows about? But, you know, it's worth it to them because they wanted to keep them separate, you know?
I have a Facebook page, and I was shocked when a funder wrote me a note, friended me a while ago, and all of a sudden there was a piece of professional information they wanted from me, which I was happy to deliver, but I was shocked that it came
I know.
on Facebook.
Yeah.
They, you know, wrote on my wall instead of sending me an email. That was weird. Anyway. The wall.
No, yeah.
Oh, the wall for a reason. Apparently there's lots of restrictions you can build into Facebook,
Yeah.
right? And tweeting, do people tweet?
I don't.
They
I haven't done
tweet,
that.
no.
No.
But we were getting all these hits about tweets, you know, people wanting to read our tweets, so I have someone who puts at least one tweet up every day. And it seems to engender more people hitting on your site, which causes you to go up, you know, in the Google
Right.
ratings or whatever, and, you know, what do you think about that?
I mean, I don't use Twitter, and I'm not so much the person who will like post if a client does something. I don't normally put that on my personal Facebook site or something like that. I mean, I know that Chuck's manager, Anna de Archuleta, uses Facebook, but she has a separate page for her company that she uses. And she also, and she also has Twitter, you know, separately with her company and uses it for those means. And I think that could be very valuable. It's not somewhere that I've gone yet, but I can see it as a very valuable outlet.
That's different.
It is. It can be valuable. In the program that I run, the cooperative program, we have a separate page, and one of our major benefactors friended me a couple of weeks ago, which I went, whoa. I mean, he's like, you know, major. And he was so glad to see all of the accomplishments of the singers who've been through the program and knows that his investment was a good one. So that's one way that it can work for you. And I'm very careful what I put on there because people are watching.
I think there's no question that Facebook is becoming used as a medium, even in terms of hiring. I mean, I get at least, you know, once a month a forward from one of my artists that says Facebook message from so-and-so, and, you know, it's an offer to do some sort of job. So, you know, I think that that's definitely becoming a medium by which, you know, jobs are offered and connections are made and cultivated.
I know it's a way to get instant information. If like right now, Fort Worth has just started its festival. Several are going down there. You can check in and see what's happening almost daily at the Fort Worth Opera from the webpage. Pictures and interviews.
It's really great to it's the vehicle to be able to reconnect with people that you haven't been. You never know who you sat next to in class. I was telling them earlier, somebody who took my class at Westminster is now artistic administrator at San Francisco Opera. So you never know. You never know where your colleagues from school are, where your colleagues from young honors programs are, and you know, if they might have taken a lateral direction. And it's good to reunite, reconnect with them.
When I was in grad school, I was studying physical theater in France, so I was not doing at all what I'm doing now. And through Facebook, I've reconnected with all of these people who are now artistic directors of theater companies and opera companies, and some are directors, and some become singers. And it's amazing how, just seeing how all of our paths have gone someplace new, and then they come back together again.
And this is the most cooperative art form. It's the amalgam of the arts. When librettists come to us and they say, I'm looking for a composer, and some of my first questions are, well, what plays do you like? You know, what shows have you seen? What actors do you know? I'm asking theater questions. If they don't know anything about that side of the business, if they're just narrowly focused, that's a red flag that goes up. It's like, you know, you have to expand. You have to know. It's your business to know everything about the business.
There's a book that I've told the singers in the cooperative program about. It's called The Power of Who, that I would recommend to you. he has this chart in it of concentric circles, and talking about who is in your network, who is in your closest circle of friends and colleagues and family that really know you. And then as that circle, I redid it for the singers. It might go to university connections, and it might go to young artist connections, and it may be audience, people who want to come and hear you. That there is this network of people who are interested in you. That there's a small network of people who really know you and who you can really trust. And the premise in the book is don't be afraid to reach out to your network. But it's important to know what boundaries you don't cross.
Right.
I think, Chuck sent an email out to a whole bunch of us of what you're doing. I think that's great. I loved it because my program was mentioned in your email. And so, there are things that can sort of connect you and that you can stay in touch with people. That's a way to do it, to have a website and update it, or to keep people aware of what you're doing. And don't be afraid to do that. That was a mistake I had as a young artist. I didn't have something like this. I didn't have anybody saying, put yourself out there and don't be afraid to network for yourself. And
Or even
it's
now when
hard
people
to
say
do.
to put yourself out there, great, I'd love to. How?
Yeah.
What do I do? What are
By
the
just
skills that I
showing
need
up.
to...
I was an artist with Opera Theater St. Louis years ago, and one of my students was an apprentice. And she's one of these ones who's now singing all over the world. But then she was still a young artist and not quite sure. She took off her makeup, put on her jeans, and went home. And I said, no, not at Opera Theater St. Louis. Take off your stage makeup, put your makeup back on, and go out to the tent. And talk to people. That's what the company wants you to do. They want you to interact with their donors. They want you to interact with their audience. And that kind of thing, as an artist, you have to get used to doing.
And what's the protocol now? If you go to a tent and get somebody's card, is that likely these days?
Sure.
Someone still
Yeah.
have cards. And then...
Or they text it or something.
Yeah, you text your email address to somebody you're standing next
I'll
to.
beam it to your BlackBerry.
And then, is it okay to send that person an e-blast about your calendar?
I think so.
I think so too.
Absolutely. If somebody gives you their information, wouldn't you agree that
I
you
would-
should follow up?
Yes, I think that it might be more effective to first write like a respectful note to that person saying it was a pleasure to meet you. Would you mind if I kept you? Because I get that a lot as a manager. If I can't commit to an audition for someone, or if I hear someone and I'm not ready to sign them, a question I get a lot is, can I keep you updated about what I'm doing? Because people are always making strides, and I always tell people yes, because at worst, it's another email in my inbox, and at best, I'm seeing real development in someone that might pique my interest, or want me to audition them or audition them again, So I think like Chuck, keeping people updated about what's going on, that's a really helpful tool, and I think the rule of thumb is you just have to be respectful and you have to sense boundaries, because even at the biggest companies in this country, there are administrators who are willing to have you come in and talk to them. If you work at that company, sure, come by, discuss what might be available in the next season. It doesn't all have to be through your manager or whoever, but you have to maintain the respect and know when you're treading or pushing too much on someone.
Well, and I'm glad that you mentioned face-to-face, like going out and actually talking, because that is, we keep talking about the electronic communication, but the most interactive thing you can do is have a conversation face-to-face with someone and actually interact with them. And especially when you go to young artist programs, or if you are at a company for a year, you go to a lot of those events, and you are representing the company when you're doing that, as well as representing yourself. And there are certain expectations about what you are supposed to do at events like that.
And sometimes just being seen. For me, I did a lot of work with Gerard Schwartz, and I happened to go to a concert he did in Princeton, and I went backstage to say hello, and he went, "You! What are you doing in November? Beethoven 9th. I thought, great. But just by showing up, it registered, oh yeah, you're the one I've been looking for. Where it might not, we didn't have email then, it might not have been in any kind of written correspondence. don't be afraid to show up. Go to concerts. Don't be afraid to go backstage. Don't be afraid.
When somebody says something like that to you, do you also, I mean, I use the old-fashioned way of, I have a calendar that I carry. It's an electronic calendar, but I write who I met that day, you know, probably why I met them, some little note.
Sure.
And then you can go back at the end of the month, you know, one of these days you have nothing to do, you're sitting in an airport, and you just go back and you say, oh, I never followed up on that. That's important. He said he's interested in me, I need to follow up. So there's that kind of...
There's a wonderful book out there called How to Work a Room. It's an unfortunate title, but it's called How to Work a Room. And it's something that I, especially like when I'm at Maryland and places like that, I always suggest that people read it. It's the easiest book in the world to read. It's everything you already know. You read it and you go, oh, my mother told me that when I was 7. Oh, my mother told me that when I was 12. And I read through all of that and I was like, this is the most stupid book I've ever read because it's everything my mother told me when I was a kid. And then I went, how much of that do you do? And I actually took it as an exercise one summer, and at every place where I directed, I decided to do what was in that book, and I got my database exploded just because of actually doing those things. The simplest things in the world that you forget that you already know how to do.
Manners, for one thing. People forget about that, you know, when you're at functions and
the fine line between
you know
charm
how to
and
talk to
seduction.
somebody. Absolutely.
It's true, because miscommunication happens a lot.
Unfortunately, the opera world is full of opportunities to mingle. I mean, access to artists, you know, the singers, the designers, the directors, they're the real people that, you know, you want to have access to if you're a patron. So that's a very easy thing to find usually in opera. I'm wondering about artist managers. Do you do that too when you find you're at a theater visiting, you know, one of your singers has been hired? Do you try to find your way into those rooms too, where funders are, where creative teams are?
I wouldn't say so much for funders, but certainly, you know, for casting directors and for general directors and artistic administrators, you know, so much of being an artist manager is developing a good reputation and developing a good rapport with those people. And you know, one of the great side effects of that can be being on their short list if there's a cancellation or if there's a last minute thing that needs to be filled. You know, so you, as an artist manager, as with any artist, you know, who's working for themselves, you want to be sure that you're cultivating a good image of yourself and a good reputation at all times, because the easier you are to deal with, I think in general, the better off you are as an artist manager. There are exceptions who are very difficult but have very good artists, so you can't not deal with them. But you know, in general, I think that's the best way to go.
And there's the idea of, okay, when is it time to turn off the BlackBerry? You know, not expect an instant answer. You know, that's a trap I find myself in a little bit. Does anyone else do that? Like, oh, they want an answer right away. Well, I'm going to make them wait. You know, it's actually a Saturday, and I'm not going to respond until Monday. And people are like, they get hysterical that you haven't responded right away because they know you have this BlackBerry, and they know that you could, if you wanted to, turn it on and look at it. Does that? I find people get over that, though. They understand it. And it's actually nice to have that boundary occasionally.
And I think when email first started, because the information went out immediately, people expected an immediate response, but now that just about everybody that you deal with has the same problem, I think they all understand too that you have to separate things into this is urgent, this is important, this is not important, this is not important, not urgent. And however you prioritize those, you can do that for your personal life, you can do that for your business life with that communication.
But I do, for certain people, I do say, you know, call me anytime. And that is a very powerful line. You know, when you use that sparingly, it's a very powerful line to say, you know, I'm available, this is my cell phone, anytime you need me. And it's usually actually for a press person or something like that you know that they're working on deadlines so
I had
frequently.
a student I just introduced to a conductor. This was somebody, we were Adler Fellows together, and he's away, he's conducting now, not singing. And he said to me, tell your student to call me. And so my student's like, should I email him? Well, you know, I said, he said to call him. There's his phone number, call him, do not email him, call him. But what if I just send an email first? No, call him. So don't Don't be afraid to do what they've told you to do.
And I mean, we've even had our Blackberries talking to one another where she needed information for what I'm going to be teaching. She said, could you please send me that information? I couldn't do it immediately because I didn't have my computer on me. But just responding, I got this email, I'll get to you as soon as I can, send. That doesn't take any time at all.
No.
She knows that her email didn't get disappearing somewhere and that I'm going to respond to it.
Yeah.
And then follow through. Do what you say you're going to do. I hope I sent that information.
How about on the receiving end for all of us, if the singer has some urgent thing, they need like a letter of recommendation, or someone is trying to fill this role and they need it now. How do we filter that? Because that happens a lot in this business, so it can be constant. How do you be helpful but yet also keep your distance to?
Well, this happened to me recently in that one of the local companies in Princeton needed an artist quit, and I was called because somebody that I work with, they were interested in, but she wasn't available. But I was able to produce this long list of, but how about these? And this is how you can get in touch with them. And I was kind of amazed at myself that I could do that. I could produce, call this person and see about this one and that because of just connections and people that I've worked with.
Alex, would you do that across other?
When this was an emergency, that's why.
Would you suggest other people?
Oh, certainly, yeah. And I think that that's one of the things that I try to always be mindful of, is that especially at the boutique level where I operate, outside of IMG and Cami and Opus 3, we're kind of all a little team because we are competing, but we're also trying to grab a section of the pie, And so I frequently have, and I've done this with Anna, I've done this with other managers where if my artist cancels, I'm contacting those managers saying, do you have someone that can take this over? And then, that gets paid back to me. So, I think that's a very important part of what we do.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
The singer who needs something from you it kind of crosses over that border of maintaining the relationship and how not to network. If the only contact I have from that singer is when they need something from me, then I become more reluctant about my relationship with them. If they maintain a relationship with me where there is a give and take in a conversation and a sharing of information, then I'm more readily, I will put them up on that urgent, let's do this now, prioritized list.
And getting back to being, the CEO of your own company or whatever, the tone that you set if you write Chuck 2 days before the George London deadline and say, I really need a letter of recommendation and I forgot to ask you earlier, I'm really sorry, that can really damage your relationship with someone regardless of how well you've built that relationship before. And I've known several administrators, who really like an artist, really admire an artist, want to help that person, and then, they get something saying, I need a letter of recommendation for this a day before. And, it knocks you down on the credibility, line that you weren't in charge of your own stuff and ready to go and had it to them well in advance and respected their time and their effort.
And our word on those letters of recommendation is important. We don't have like some form letter of recommendation that we send out. We really want to be able to personalize that, because if this company suddenly gets the same letter from me over and over again with somebody else's name in it, they realize they're not going to start paying attention to me anymore. I will no longer be on their list of people that they come to in their network. Our letter of recommendation must mean something from us to that company, not just from you to me.
Yeah.
Another thing today reminded me of is summer. Heat and summer doesn't mean a slowdown of work anymore. The profession is so full of so many outlets for the talent that's in this industry now. Little festivals, chamber music, theater festivals that do crossover pieces, videos. Don't you find that, has that changed since?
Oh yeah, yeah. And there's all these little upstart companies. It was one of on the singer training forum one of our last meetings. I can't remember who it was who talked about that they didn't have any work and they decided they were going to produce an opera, and that their friends got together and they they did an opera, and this person was going to manage it, was going to publicize it. Sharon Daniels. And the person who was managing it now is a major manager. But they found work. They created work for themselves. I have a student, was telling Chuck, who was tired of not seeing things on her resume. And so she created 2 operas. She did Hansel and Gretel, and she did Dido and Aeneas, where she did the witch and the mother in Hansel and Gretel, and Dido and the sorceress in Dido and Aeneas. So she added 4 roles to her resume. And because nobody was saying, come please, you must come sing, but she wants to sing.
And
so,
to be proactive about your own creative opportunities. When I went from being an actor to being a director, nobody knew my work as a director, so I self-produced as well. And again, one of the things that I self-produced was a production of Wozzeck that Seattle Opera came to see and said, have you ever directed opera before? This is exactly what we're looking for. So had I not taken that risk of doing that for myself, I wouldn't be sitting here doing this now.
And the good thing is these companies, even the ones that they create themselves, you can have a web presence. So there's an actual destination that someone in an office can go to. If they need extra information, there's usually press list, pictures, who is in it, what the next event is. All of that is at your fingertips. And the summer is just a great time for that to bloom. Fringe festivals, why not add opera to all these fringe festivals all over the country that tend to grow up around regional theater? Why not stage things at chamber music concerts at the same fringe kind of festival?
I have several singers going to young artist programs this summer, and one of them said, so what do I do there? Very naively, they've gotten their roles, this is what they have to learn musically, but my best advice to them was to be curious and to go to rehearsals that you're not in, and go and observe somebody else's process of finding a character and finding a physical life, and just be there, be a part of the program, and you'll get noticed. That'll be noticed that you take that initiative to not just do what you've been assigned.
Summer's a great time to take classes that you don't get anywhere else too. That there's a 6-week acting class that you can take in your town. There's a ballroom dance class because you're going to be doing Giovanni next year, and you got to do all 3 of those dances that are in there. You got to do them. So why not take the opportunity to go and learn how to do them?
We're going to open the forum to your questions now. You can tell these people can't stop. They are such a wealth of information, but let's get very specific with some questions. Yes, back there.
Hi, I'm Andrea in Champone. I just want to say thank you first of all for coming and taking time this evening. My question concerns more the issues pertaining to artist management. I'm wondering what your opinion is on some of the current trends with retainer fees, disclosure agreements, and exclusivity, items in the contract.
Repeat the question.
Sure. She's asking about artist management and my opinion on retainer fees, exclusivity. What was the other one?
Oh, some disclosure statements.
Disclosure. Okay. Well, retainers is the easiest one. I mean, that's the elephant in the room, I think, for anyone looking for artist management. And I was actually having a conversation with a colleague the other day about this. I think the problem with retainers is that people try to say that they're not retainers, and they say that it's expenses, or it's this, or it's that. Well, regardless of what kind of work someone's doing for you, it never costs a certain amount of money each month, every month, to do that work for you. So if it's expenses, it should be itemized, and you should know this is what was actually spent on me. I don't think retainers are always a bad thing, per se. It just has to be clearly communicated why a retainer is being charged, what you're getting for that retainer, and then you have to analyze the cost benefit to you as an artist of, okay, this manager is saying they're going to charge me this amount of money per month, but they're going to get me these auditions that I couldn't get myself. That's worth it to me. I think it really comes down to being clear with the artist about what the retainer is, why it's there, what it does. Exclusivity, I think, in North America, it's the way that artist management is done, which is very different from Europe. I think European artists are used to having several managers work for them non-exclusively. I have been on the other end of that in the US trying to work for an artist non-exclusively, and you end up getting emails saying, who is this person's manager? Would the real manager please stand up? I don't know. So I think you kind of have to work with someone exclusively in North America at least. And then what do you mean by disclosure?
I guess just statements where, you know, certain things you've kept private between, you know, management or, and maybe I think I mean that more as a general statement. Maybe it's not even artist management, but if you're working with a producer or working with, you know,
The only time that I've had like a non-disclosure agreement, like if we're working on an original work or something, we don't want certain information that is going on in rehearsal to get out to the press, for example.
Right, but yet you're working in like collaboration with someone, so say you are going after a corporate endorsement, it's like that fine line of how much intellectual property you should let out in order to help your project, as opposed to,
I think
sorry, I
that's
should have separated the two.
I think that's probably where the hierarchy of who is the one person that is communicating for that organization. Is it the producer? Is it the press person? Who's the one person that should be going to those people and discussing that information? And if somebody comes to you and says, oh, I hear such and such is going on, whether you have a non-disclosure agreement or not, you should be able to say, I'm not the person to answer that question, unless it's your best friend and you're saying, oh my God, I had a crappy day in rehearsal today. But even then, you know, if your friend is the wife of a singer who's on the show, then it's all going to get back to something.
Also, there's a lot on, in Opera America has a lot of different handbooks for things. I don't know if it's specifically on disclosure, but about agreements, about
Who's the singer-manager relationship?
There's a lot that Opera America has in their library. Is it online as well? Or do they?
There are many articles online in our online archive that members can access, and then also there's a whole book on the singer-manager relationship here that talks about a lot of things in that realm. While I'm talking, I have a question from our web viewer about networking with management. Alex, specifically, do you think is it necessary to cultivate a relationship with the manager before asking for an audition, or is it appropriate to ask for a full audition?
I mean, I think that both can be equally effective depending on, you know, kind of where you are in your career. As a manager, I mean, you know, I'm often looking either for a certain both level of engagements and, you know, growing and developing in engagements. And I'm also looking for names of trusted colleagues who I can contact and talk to about that artist. So in that case, a cold audition request often works fine if that's the way that it comes about. If you happen to have a personal connection to a manager, I think it's great to cultivate that. You just have to be careful about it because, you know, there are some relationships where you're just friends with somebody who happens to be a manager, and that kind of happened to me because I was an assistant at a company and then I went to having my own company, and suddenly I had all these people who I was friends with who were singers when I was an assistant. Now I'm a manager. And they want an audition, you know, and that's not a bad thing, but it has to be worked. That sounds bad, but I mean, you know, it has to come about the right way, and so I think both can work equally effectively. It just depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, another question. Here,
Getting back to some of the networking aspects, I don't know if I'm going to phrase the question correctly, but I never came into the opera world on a straight path. Into the theater world before and dancing, and then just kind of blossomed into the vocal world. I find myself, the opera world is going well, it's steadily growing and going well for me. However, I'm starting to meet other people and networking with people in the fashion world, in the design world. I have a relationship a little bit with Scott, with Louis Vuitton, and a shoe designer, artists that are working in galleries, and we talk about music and how does one, do you see a trend of this happening with the opera world per se, and how does one all of a sudden still want to stay focused on saying, okay, I want to focus on my butterfly or my and say as a focused artist, but yet I see these other areas of the world kind of coming into my world, and I see a lot of transitioning aspects in here, a lot of connections in here that kind of can, one hand can kind of help the other, and there's a part of me that's kind of like, wow, you know, it's expanding, but yet it seems overwhelming.
Everybody, just to repeat your question, is like, what do you do when you realize your contacts are scattered everywhere, and you have great contacts in fashion, you have great contacts in, you know, a gallery. How do you use those and still say, but I'm a singer? Is that cancel out that? I don't
Well,
think so.
something Laura was just talking about was that those concentric circles,
Right,
and you've got your area of concern and your area of interest as an individual as well. I'm a director. I read nothing but cross-cultural mythology because I love it. Does that help me as a director? It does.
Right.
But I don't really seek out authors of those books to help me as a director. I just know that information is there. But I shouldn't close off that area of interest because that's something that makes my artistic expression the individual thing that it is. So your particular individual interests are only going to make you, the individual artist, better than or different than or more specific than the other people in your flock.
It's causing me to think a lot harder, and to also sometimes every now and then these ideas will pop in my mind and say, oh wait, this can work with this, such as like I'm working with, where I met an event producer with current affairs and who's working with high-end hotels, and I'm like, oh, okay, I see this concert going to this, and I met this executive chef.
Everybody does that.
So, okay.
When you go to opera
Yeah.
conferences,
Right.
what you learn is
Right.
that there's a trend of operas moving out of the opera house.
Okay.
You know, galleries are
Right.
a viable venue. Fashion, of course, has a
Yeah.
huge overlap with opera. Event planning is opera,
Right,
basically.
right.
You know, yes, cultivate all those contacts.
Act on it. Act on it.
Absolutely. I've had students who have all of these areas of interest, and you know they're
Right.
going on the singing path, and I encourage them to keep those, you know, all those pots boiling, all the while you're focusing on your singing and your, because you never know how they're going to tie together.
Right.
I know that for me, as a, you know, I came out of school going, I'm going to sing, and right out of a young artist program, my teacher taught at my school every summer, and they needed a part-time teacher, and she said, she's just sitting here waiting for her next audition. She can do it. Let her try to teach. And so if I had said, no, I'm only going to do this, and hadn't tried that, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. It's the best decision I ever made.
And you have to have a life to be able to portray one on stage.
And guess what? Going to galleries, you're going to bump into some other opera
Yeah.
producers. You know,
And when you
that
say work
going
with
to-
words,
yeah.
you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be.
they go to those things too. It's not just you
Right,
that is.
right.
Yeah.
In the middle, had a question.
Yeah, do you think that singers who have not gone through conservatory and the young artist route are inevitably at a disadvantage? And what would you recommend in terms of overcoming that networking wise?
Repeat that back. Who wants to?
You're saying those who've not gone to conservatory or have not been in an apprentice program,
Right.
are you at a disadvantage? Probably, but that doesn't mean it's insurmountable. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I mean that's what kinds of things would you advise in order to overcome that disadvantage? Because you know it's one thing to get rehired by being a good colleague, but if you can't get an audition to begin with, it's a bit of a catch-22. And so if you have
Do you study with someone?
yeah.
And do you coach with someone?
Yeah, and I have a wonderful growing network that way, but it's a matter of moving up to the next level. And
So sometimes it's just a matter of, will voice teacher X call this person and say, would you listen? Or would Chuck Hudson, I've done some dramatic work with him, you know, how can your network help get you out there? Sometimes it's just a matter of a phone call.
Well, I think, oh, sorry. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead.
I think that this also is where it becomes really important what Laura and Chuck were saying about making your own opportunities. I think that becomes even more important when other people aren't giving you opportunities. You know, and even if you get together with a few people and put something on yourself and then invite people or have your network help you invite people or whatever it is, you know, you can slowly start to put that together and really build that into something. I mean, I think Laura is right that if you come from a conservatory or a young artist program, you have that backing and it's built in, and that's great, but there are definitely other ways that you can do it. And I think what they said about putting something together yourself and then trying to work that opportunity can be equally helpful.
Even if you don't get responses from your connections, continue. That's again the tedious thing of Why do I keep doing this if I don't get the response? It may be that this season at this particular place there was nothing for you. Next season, oh, there's that girl again, we have nothing for her. Oh, we've already cast this. You never know why you don't get the gig. You never know why you get the gig.
But like I said, like my student created more interest on her resume by finding an opportunity for herself. And you know, that's, if it's the same resume every time you apply and you've not added anything to it, you know, pretty soon the resume is going to go in the...
Yeah, it's not so much that. I mean, I do see a lot of possibilities, but part of it also is wondering in the early stage of someone's career, if you look at their resume and they don't have those credentials, is it a real strike against them, or is that not so much?
No, if somebody hears you and they hear that you can sing, I have a graduate auditions class that I teach at Westminster, and I brought Jonna Rolandi from Chicago in to hear the singers, and she said, I'll hear you, I'll hear anybody, and if I don't see a lot of experience on your resume, but I hear it in your singing, and I hear it in the fact that you've cultivated your sound, I'm going to give you a shot. And so, you know, you still work on your craft. You still work on your craft and try to get somebody to hear you.
Also, especially new work can be, because composers and you know, cultivating relationships with composers, they'll often write for you, and it'll be what you can do best. And maybe it won't be someone who can go from Miguel at the doorbell to whatever, but they'll adapt it for you specifically, and that is something on your resume, and you had a success with it, and you move ahead.
I would also, I think it's real important that you look at career paths of people that you admire, and you look and see how did they get to there. You look like at a career of somebody like Lorraine Hunt Lieberson, who found her way through new music. If you're only looking at the standard repertoire and you're only putting yourself out there as the next Susanna, you've got to find other. The road in might not be through the front door; it could very well be the back door, or the side door, or through the servants' quarters. I don't know, but if there's a way in, you need to find it.
Yes.
I would love to know how each of you keep track of your network, like technology-wise. Do you do address book? Do you keep an Excel spreadsheet? I've heard lots of different suggestions. But
How do you keep track of your work? Well, I'll start
in
by
your head.
being a CEO of your own company, which you phrased and heard is the best. And I have a company, so I actually do send my contacts to someone who helps me keep track of it. But you can do that yourself. Definitely having a BlackBerry and being able to just accept anybody's contacts, or seeing whoever you've written to, usually having your signature, have all the contacts on the bottom is a very useful thing. Is that answering your question, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Just what method you use.
I know I keep files on my computer. I'll keep different files, so that I can drag an email or drag something into it that I know that I have my private lessons file, I have my Westminster file, I have my cooperative file, I have personal, and I can know that I can go back in and, I'm very visual. I have to see where it is, where it all is. I'm not going to ever remember it. I've got to see it.
Yeah.
Mine's kind of scattered around on my hard drive as well. I use Microsoft Outlook for a good deal of it because it's something that will go onto my BlackBerry. I use FileMaker to make more extensive notes. My web manager has its own database system that I had to turn all of that into Excel and then have it uploaded to get it there. Mainly though, when people call me and say, I've just heard so-and-so singing, what would she like to work with? I have to go into one of those files, find out where I worked with them, then go into that production file and find my evaluation of their work.
And beware, he takes extensive notes. I mean detailed, down to, incredibly detailed notes.
And if you have
scary.
Friends,
how much you remember.
Friends that keep better records than you do, ask them to help you with this. Today you can do shared files on the web. Have someone help you manage your Rolodex.
And I actually use a Mac, and I think that that's great because Mac address books, you can create little books for each. I can say accompanists, I can say managers, I can say, whoever. you know, and keep things really organized that way, and take notes in the address book itself. You know, and then with the Mac mail program, I can create different inboxes and say, okay, potential auditions, you know, or whatever it might be. And then I use those little like sticky yellow tab things, but they've adapted for your desktop. I love that. And so I just like make like 5 of those and like write different things down on it, like, oh, contact someone in February or whatever it might be, you know. So that's kind of
We're
what I
bringing somebody into cooperative. His name is Bill Bennett. You might have heard he's got a program called Velvet Singer that is supposed to help singers organize and keep track of all of this stuff and be able to keep PDFs of applications and be able to, and I would look it up.
Yeah, I'm trying to be good about it, because I'm just a couple of years in, and I'm already like, oh my gosh.
There's a lot.
Yeah. And right now is the time to be preparing for fall auditions, right now.
And one of the things that was in this outline about what this panel was about was how not to feel overwhelmed by this. And if you wait until the last minute, again, we're performers. We wait until we have a deadline before we do anything, right? So as I always say, organization is the key to entertainment. As Charles was saying, at the end of the month, if you're sitting at the airport and you realize you have time to update your database, do it. It's tedious, you don't want to do it, you'd rather go to Starbucks, but go to Starbucks,
But you
update your
can do it at
database so that it's done by the time you need it.
So we're going to be very organized here and call the formal part of the evening to an end. And I think now there's a reception that we're all invited to. So thank you for Opera America for this wonderful.